When the Miami Heat assembled the Big Three in the summer of 2010, when LeBron James and Chris Bosh left their respective teams to team up with Dwayne Wade, the advent of super teams was born. And while yes, there were super teams that came before them, like the Boston Celtics from 2008 with Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, and Ray Allen, or the Lakers of 2004 when Karl Malone and Gary Payton joined Kobe and Shaq, all at the tail end of their careers. But LeBron and Bosh teaming up with Wade took super teams to a whole new level when you had two of the top 5 players in the NBA on the same team and 3 players all in the peak of their prime. And this set in motion a flurry of super teams that would come after, where you had superstars teaming up with one another to try and win multiple championships. The Lakers would try to do this by adding Dwight Howard to Kobe and Gasol. Later on, of course, the infamous Warriors super team that Kevin Durant joined forces with an already best team in the league, to then Kevin Durant leaving the Warriors to form another super team with the Brooklyn Nets that would later be joined by Kyrie Irving and James Harden. The Clippers forming their super team with Paul George, Kawhi, and then obviously later on James Harden again. The current Milwaukee Bucks after they traded for superstar Damian Lillard to join Giannis and Chris Middleton. And then, of course, Kevin Durant in the mix yet again with another super team in the Phoenix Suns with Devin Booker and Bradley Beal. Safe to say, super teams have been all the rage for superstar players who have yet to win a title to try and secure that ring. But while the Big Three of the Heat were able to win 2 championships, as did the Warriors with Kevin Durant, the decade-plus long era of super teams is done, as teams are now slowly starting to realize that putting together a star-studded cast sounds good in theory, and more likely than not is a recipe to set your franchise back for years. And it's what we'll be talking about further in this video. As always, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to help the channel grow, and in return, I'll be providing more NBA content like this. Now, when Kevin Durant teamed up with the Warriors in 2016, a team that had just come off a season in which they set a record for most wins in the regular season but failed to win the championship, it was seen as a pretty weak move at the time. And that's putting it lightly, actually. Honestly, it was by most seen as one of the weakest moves in NBA history to get yourself an easy ring. And sure enough, Kevin Durant got his championships, but he also wanted to prove that he could win elsewhere in being the man on his team and not riding the coattails of the already established Warriors Big Three. So naturally, he goes to the Nets, where another super team is formed that fails miserably, having never made it beyond the second round of the playoffs. While the Brooklyn Nets gave up a treasure trove of their future assets to get Harden as well as for the sign and trade for Kevin Durant. Luckily for the Nets, though, when they realized that this wasn't going to work and all of their Big Three would eventually go on to request trades, they were able to flip their players for a considerable amount of assets, most notably for Kevin Durant when they traded him to the Suns for 4 first-round picks as well as their young core in Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson. 6 assets for an aging Kevin Durant with 4 years left on his max contract at the time. Don't get me wrong, it's Kevin Durant, and despite him getting into his mid-30s at the time of the trade, he's still a dominant force and superstar in the NBA. If you have the opportunity to land him, you go for it. The problem, though, is the Suns. While they entered the playoffs that season with KD, it was clear that the fit on the roster, the style of play, wasn't conducive to today's fast-paced, high-octane, spread-the-floor type offense. A team primarily comprised of mid-range shooters and isolation-heavy players doesn't really work in today's NBA. Building a team like it's 2006 in 2024 isn't going to get you the results that you think. And so what did the Suns do? Well, they doubled down on their roster by trading even more assets and more of their youth to get Bradley Beal, and later on being involved in the 3-team trade that would send Damian Lillard to the Milwaukee Bucks, where the Suns would move their young center and former number 1 overall pick in DeAndre Ayton to the Blazers. The Suns would land a shooter in Grayson Allen, and who would eventually go on to have one of his best shooting seasons of his career, but the Suns still faced the same problems they did previously. The dreaded math problem where despite being an efficient team on offense, 5th in the league in overall field goal percentage and 5th in 3-point percentage, they simply put, don't get enough shots up, having finished 27th in the NBA in field goal attempts and 25th in 3-point attempts. I've mentioned this before on my Bulls channel, and as a Bulls fan, I know this problem all too well. It is increasingly hard to win games consistently when your opponent is able to get more possessions and more shots up than you do. And when you're 4th to last in the league in overall shots taken, as much star power as one might have, you're not going to be able to win a title in today's NBA. But this season, the side for the Suns, which is all but over and not even coming close to an NBA title, is the future of that franchise. Because the Suns, after having traded away all their draft assets to assemble their super team, they are now left in a place with one of the highest payrolls in the league, where they have Kevin Durant, Booker, and Beal all on max deals for the next 2 seasons, and Nurkic, who is making close to $20 million a year for the next 2 seasons, the salaries of KD, Booker, and Beal alone, which total over $150 million next season, is more than the total payroll of 14 teams of their entire roster, according to Bobby Marks of ESPN. Not only do they have $190 million committed on their books next season and $193 million the following season, putting them over the second tax apron, which takes away their ability to use the full mid-level exception and their ability to trade their first-round pick 7 years out in the future. Not only that, but the Suns, over the next 6 years, have just 1 first-round pick, which is for this upcoming draft in 2024 at the number 22 selection, in a weak draft class, mind you. And that's it. 0 second-round picks. They traded all of those to Bradley Beal and most of their first-round picks for Kevin Durant. One late first-round pick in this upcoming draft for the next 6 years, with the second highest payroll in the league for a first-round exit playoff team. Here's the thing, with the new rules of the CBA, NBA teams are no longer incentivized to spend large amounts of money well over the luxury tax, making it incredibly difficult for teams to have 3 max players on your roster, because with the cap constraints and the luxury tax aprons, it makes it near impossible to fill out the rest of the roster to build around your max players when you have nothing but minimum contracts to work with. Having 3 superstars is nice, but it means nothing when you have absolutely 0 depth and you have 3 stars who don't complement each other's skills as redundant players, which is exactly the case that the Phoenix Suns have found themselves in. And with Kevin Durant now 35, Bradley Beal now 30, your star players are already starting to age out, while you have little to work with for the future in a Western Conference that has become increasingly more competitive. Like really, I honestly don't know what the Suns can even do this summer to improve their roster. They blew away all their assets, including some of their up-and-coming players like Bridges and Cam Johnson, to put together a roster that isn't fit for today's style of NBA basketball. The only way I can see them getting out of this, which I know is crazy to do and they likely will never do it, but it's to flip Kevin Durant and trade him to try and recoup some of the assets they gave up to get him. KD is going to be 36 by the start of next season. He's going to be extension eligible this offseason. He's not going to be part of your long-term plans, but he still has a lot of value as a superstar in this league, and teams will be willing to give up first-round picks to get him, especially some of these teams that are trying to contend for a title but will likely fall short in their effort this season. I'm looking at a team like the Knicks, who could use a superstar in New York to finally get them over the hump, and would have salary filler player like Julius Randle to get the deal done, and also a ton of draft capital to be able to ship to the Suns. Hell, maybe you send KD back to Oklahoma City to give them some veteran leadership and they have a treasure trove of picks and assets. I don't think that would ever happen, but you get the point. The only meaningful way I see the Suns getting out of this whole mess that they've dug themselves in is by trading Kevin Durant while he still has value. Or you just ride it out and keep doubling down while the team likely goes nowhere. Yeah, you can trade Booker and try to get a lot for him, but he's only 27 in the peak of his prime. You're not going to trade Booker and just keep building around an aging Kevin Durant and Beal with no future. That doesn't really make sense. The only way you can recover some of your future is by moving on from Kevin Durant. The Suns aren't going to do that because I'm sure Ishbia is going to keep doubling down on his aggressive moves that he thought were genius at the time, but it's the only way I can see them getting out of this mess, because getting beat down in the first round of the playoffs is not what this team had in mind when going into the season. A cautionary lesson in the risk of super teams, and why you're seeing these types of teams fail more than they do succeed like in years past. And to be honest, you're seeing the same thing from both the Clippers and the Bucks, who are likely on their way to first-round exits with little draft capital and future assets to work with going forward, all while being luxury tax teams with the highest payrolls. It's going to make for an interesting offseason for all of these teams. I'd love to hear what you guys think. Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.